The radar screen at Nelly's Air Force Base blinked once, then twice, before going dark. Senior Airman Marcus Webb leaned forward, his coffee forgotten, and tapped the console with 2 fingers. Nothing. The ghost signal had appeared 14 minutes ago, unidentified, moving at impossible speeds through restricted airspace near Groom Lake. Now it was gone. Not descended. Not diverted. Just gone. Webb's hand hovered over the red phone that connected directly to NORAD, but something made him hesitate. The signature had been wrong from the start. Too clean. Too precise. Like someone was flying a machine that shouldn't exist, or flying in a way that defied every protocol he'd memorized in 6 years of service. His supervisor, Captain Rachel Okonkwo, appeared behind him with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen 3 deployments and never raised her voice. "Tell me you've got an explanation," she said. Webb shook his head. The ghost had entered the zone at 3:47 hours, flying low enough to dodge primary radar, but high enough to leave a heat signature that their satellite uplink caught for exactly 90 seconds. Then silence. Okonkwo pulled up the recorded track on her own screen, her dark eyes narrowing. The flight path made no sense. It had threaded through 2 no-fly zones, executed a vertical climb that should have shredded any known airframe, and vanished over terrain so hostile that even the Air Force's most experienced test pilots avoided it after dark. "Could be a malfunction," Webb offered, though he didn't believe it. Okonkwo didn't respond. She was already on the phone to Creech, her voice low and urgent. Within minutes, the room filled with personnel. Colonels, intelligence officers, a 2-star general who smelled like cigar smoke and looked like he hadn't slept in days. They replayed the track 17 times. Someone suggested a drone. Someone else mentioned experimental stealth tech. But nobody could explain the maneuvers. Nobody could explain why the craft had circled back, just once, over a coordinate that matched nothing in their database. Nothing except an old access road that hadn't been used since the Cold War. At 600 hours, a decision was made. 2 F-22 Raptors scrambled from Nelly's, their sleek forms cutting through the Nevada dawn like knives. Their orders were simple: locate, identify, intercept. Do not engage unless threatened. The pilots, both seasoned veterans with over 1,000 hours in 5th-generation fighters, acknowledged and went wheels up. Okonkwo watched them disappear into the pale morning sky, her jaw tight. Webb glanced at her. "What aren't you telling me?" he asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled up a personnel file on her tablet, the screen glowing in the dim light. The photo showed a woman with sharp cheekbones and eyes that seemed to look through the camera. Her call sign was listed in bold letters: Revenant. Beneath it, a service record that had been partially redacted. Okonkwo's finger hovered over the file. "Pray they don't find her," she whispered. The 2 Raptors split formation at 20,000 feet, their radar sweeping the desert below in overlapping cones of invisible energy. Lead was Major Danny Cortez, a man who'd flown combat missions over Syria and never lost his cool. His wingman, Captain Yuki Tanaka, was younger but sharp, her instincts honed by years of aggressor training against the best pilots in the world. They communicated in clipped, efficient phrases, their voices crackling through encrypted channels. "Raptor 1, nothing on thermals," Cortez said. "Raptor 2, same," Tanaka replied. They descended to 15,000, then 10, their eyes scanning the horizon where the sun was beginning to burn away the morning haze. The desert stretched endlessly below them, a sea of rust and shadow. Then Tanaka saw it. A glint of metal near a dry lake bed half hidden by a ridge. "Raptor 1, I've got something. 2 o'clock, 4 miles. Cortez banked hard, his Raptor responding instantly. They closed the distance in seconds, their targeting systems locking onto the object. It was an aircraft, but not one either of them recognized. The airframe was sleek and angular, coated in a matte gray that seemed to absorb light. No markings. No identification. It sat perfectly still on the cracked earth, its canopy open. Cortez felt his pulse quicken. "Raptor 2, do you see a pilot?" Tanaka zoomed her optics, scanning the cockpit. It was empty. Negative, birds cold, no heat signature. Cortez circled once, his instincts screaming at him. Something was wrong. The plane looked operational, untouched by the violence of a crash or emergency landing. It looked like someone had simply parked it there and walked away. Raptor 1 to Nellie's control, we've located the unidentified craft. No pilot present, requesting ground support. There was a pause longer than usual before Okonkwo's voice came through. Stand by, Raptor 1. Do not approach the aircraft. Repeat, do not approach. Cortez frowned. Control, the area is secure. We can. Negative, Okonkwo interrupted, her tone sharp. You are ordered to maintain altitude and observe only. Cortez exchanged a glance with Tanaka over the radio, though they were miles apart. Orders were orders. They pulled back, circling at a safe distance, their eyes locked on the strange aircraft below. Minutes passed. The sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the lakebed. Then Tanaka's voice crackled through, tense and confused. Raptor 1, I've got movement. 300 meters north of the craft. Cortez swung his attention to the coordinates. A figure emerged from behind the ridge, walking slowly toward the aircraft. It was a woman dressed in a flight suit that looked decades out of date. Her gait was steady, unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world. She climbed into the cockpit, her movements precise and practiced. Cortez's breath caught. Control, the pilot just returned. Say again, pilot is boarding the aircraft. The canopy closed with a smooth hiss. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the aircraft's engines roared to life, a sound that seemed to split the desert air. Cortez and Tanaka watched, transfixed, as the plane rolled forward, gained speed, and lifted off in a climb so steep it should have been impossible. It punched through the sound barrier with barely a ripple, the sonic boom echoing across the empty land. The two Raptors tried to follow, their afterburners screaming, but the craft was already gone, disappearing into the sun like a mirage. Cortez felt a cold sweat on his neck. Control, target is airborne, we've lost visual. There was silence on the other end. Then Okonkwo's voice, quieter now, almost reverent. Copy that, Raptor 1, return to base. Cortez wanted to ask questions, wanted to demand answers, but something in her tone stopped him. He and Tanaka turned back toward Nellie's, the mystery burning in their minds. Behind them, the desert returned to silence, as if nothing had happened at all. The debriefing room at Nellie's was cold and windowless, the kind of place where secrets were kept and careers were ended. Cortez and Tanaka sat across from Okonkwo and the two-star general, whose name they'd learned was Matthias Greer. A stack of files sat on the table between them, each one stamped with red lettering, classified eyes only. Greer leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, and studied the two pilots with the kind of gaze that made even veterans feel like cadets. What you saw this morning, he began, his voice gravelly, does not leave this room. Understood, Cortez nodded. Tanaka did the same, though her jaw was tight. Who was she? Cortez asked. Greer glanced at Okonkwo, who slid one of the files across the table. Cortez opened it. The photo was the same one Okonkwo had looked at earlier, the woman with the sharp cheekbones and the call sign Revenant. Her real name was listed as Captain Isla Kale. Cortez scanned the service record. It was impressive. Too impressive. Academy honors, Top Gun distinction, combat missions over hostile territory that had earned her a Silver Star. Then 5 years ago the record went dark. No assignments, no promotions, just a single line, status, inactive special assignment. She was one of ours, Okonkwo said quietly. One of the best pilots the Air Force ever produced. They pulled her for a black project, something experimental. We don't have clearance for the details, but what we do know is that she was testing aircraft that officially don't exist. Tanaka frowned. Then why is she out there alone? Why isn't she on a base somewhere? Greer's expression darkened. Because the project was shut down. Budget cuts, political pressure, the usual bureaucratic nightmare. Kale and a handful of others were reassigned, their work buried under miles of red tape. But she didn't let it go. She kept flying, kept testing, on her own. Cortez felt a chill. You're telling me she stole a classified aircraft? Greer's silence was answer enough. Okonkwo leaned forward, her voice steady. 3 months ago, a prototype went missing from a secure hangar at Groom Lake. No alarms, no witnesses. It took us weeks to even realize it was gone. When we finally did, we started seeing ghost signals. Always at night. always in restricted zones, always gone before we could respond. And you think it's her, Tanaka said. It wasn't a question, Okonkwo nodded. We know it's her. The flight patterns match her style, aggressive, precise, reckless in all the right ways. She's pushing that aircraft to its limits, doing things the engineers said were impossible. Cortez closed the file, his mind racing. So what's the plan? Bring her in, arrest her. Greer's laugh was bitter. Arrest her. Son, she's flying a machine that cost more than a carrier strike group. If she wanted to disappear, we'd never find her. And if she decided to make a statement, she could embarrass every defense contractor and general in the Pentagon before breakfast. He paused, his eyes hard. No, we're not arresting her. We're watching her, waiting to see what she does next, because whatever her endgame is, it's bigger than just proving a point. The room fell silent. Cortez and Tanaka exchanged a glance, the weight of the situation settling over them. They'd been sent to intercept a ghost, only to find a legend. The days that followed were strange. Cortez and Tanaka returned to their regular duties, flying training sorties and pretending they hadn't seen what they'd seen. But the debriefing haunted them. Cortez found himself pulling up old footage of Kale from her time at Top Gun, watching the way she flew with a kind of effortless aggression that made even the best pilots look pedestrian. She never wasted movement, never hesitated. Every maneuver was calculated, purposeful, and executed with the kind of confidence that came from knowing you were better than everyone else in the sky. Tanaka, meanwhile, dug into the few unredacted portions of Kale's service record. There were gaps, whole years missing, but what remained painted a picture of someone who'd sacrificed everything for her work. No family, no personal life, just the machine and the mission. It was admirable and tragic in equal measure. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the base settled into the quiet hum of night operations, Cortez found himself in the officers' club nursing a bourbon. Tanaka slid into the seat across from him, her expression thoughtful. You think she's crazy? Tanaka asked. Cortez considered the question. I think she's brilliant, he said finally. And I think she's angry. That's a dangerous combination. Tanaka nodded slowly. I read about the project she was part of. It was supposed to revolutionize air combat, autonomous systems, AI-assisted targeting, aircraft that could outthink and outfly anything in the world, but Congress pulled the funding, said it was too expensive, too risky. All that work, all those years, just gone. Cortez swirled his drink. So she's making them remember. Or making them regret, Tanaka said. The next morning the ghost signal appeared again. This time it was over the Pacific, 200 miles off the coast of California. Okonkwo called Cortez and Tanaka into the operations center, her face grim. The signal was moving fast, faster than anything they'd tracked before, and it was heading straight for Naval Air Station Lemoore. She's making a statement, Greer said, his voice tight. Scramble everything. I want eyes on her now. Within minutes, 6 F-A-18 Super Hornets were airborne, their pilots tense and alert. They formed a loose perimeter around the signal, their radars locked on. But Kale didn't engage. She flew straight through their formation, her aircraft pulling maneuvers that defied physics, vertical loops, snap rolls, instantaneous direction changes that should have torn the airframe apart. The Navy pilots tried to keep up, but it was like chasing smoke. One by one, they fell behind, their fuel warnings flashing red. Kale circled once over Lemoore, a silent taunt, then vanished into the clouds. The message was clear: you can't touch me. Back at Nellie's, the frustration was palpable. Greer paced the operations center like a caged animal, his jaw clenched. She's making us look like fools, he growled. Okonkwo didn't respond. She was staring at the screen, replaying the footage from the Navy pilots' gun cameras. There was something in the way Kale flew, something almost playful, like she was enjoying herself. She's not trying to hurt anyone, Okonkwo said quietly. She's trying to prove something. Greer stopped packing. Prove what? Okonkwo met his gaze. That she was right, that the project should never have been shut down, that the future of air combat is already here and we're too blind to see it. Greer's expression hardened. Then we'll make her see reason, one way or another. But Okonkwo wasn't sure that was possible. Kale had been underestimated her entire career, too young, too female, too unconventional. and now she was showing the world exactly what that underestimation had cost. Weeks passed. The ghost signals became more frequent, more brazen. Kale appeared over military bases, civilian airports, even restricted airspace near Washington, D.C. each time. She evaded interception with ease, her aircraft dancing through the sky like a phantom. The media started picking up on the story, though they didn't have the full picture. Headlines spoke of unidentified aircraft and national security threats, but those in the know understood the truth. This wasn't an enemy. This was one of their own, fighting a war they'd refused to let her win. Cortez and Tanaka watched from the sidelines, grounded by orders from Greer, but they couldn't stop thinking about her, about the loneliness of flying alone, pushing the limits with no one to share the victory or the fear. One night, Tanaka asked Cortez a question that had been gnawing at her. If you were in her position, would you do the same thing? Cortez thought for a long time before answering. I don't know, he said. But I'd like to think I'd have the guts to try. The turning point came on a cold morning in March. Kale's signal appeared over the Nevada test and training range, moving slower than usual. Okonkwo felt her stomach drop. Something was wrong. The signal was erratic, fluctuating in a way that suggested mechanical failure or worse. She ordered Cortez and Tanaka back into the air, their mission parameters clear: locate, assess, assist if necessary. They found her 20 minutes later, her aircraft trailing smoke as it limped through the sky at dangerously low altitude. Cortez's voice was steady as he opened a channel. Unidentified aircraft, this is Raptor 1. You are in distress. State your condition. For a moment there was only static. Then a voice came through, clear and calm despite the circumstances. Raptor 1, this is Revenant. I'm managing. It was the first time they'd heard her speak. Her voice was younger than Cortez expected, but there was a weight to it, a weariness that spoke of too many battles fought alone. Revenant, your aircraft is damaged. We can escort you to a safe landing. A pause. Then, almost amused, appreciate the offer, Raptor 1, but I've got this. Cortez and Tanaka flanked her, matching her speed as the desert stretched out below. They could see the damage now, a jagged tear in the wing, fluids leaking from the underside. It was a miracle she was still airborne. Revenant, you're not going to make it much farther, Tanaka said, her voice urgent. Let us help. Kale's laugh was soft, almost sad. You've already helped more than you know. Before either of them could respond, she executed a controlled descent, her damaged aircraft settling onto a dry lake bed with a grace that defied logic. The landing gear held barely, and the plane rolled to a stop in a cloud of dust. Cortez and Tanaka circled overhead, waiting for her to emerge, but she didn't. Minutes passed. Cortez's concern grew. Revenant, are you injured? No response. Tanaka's voice was tight. Raptor 1, I'm going down. Cortez wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. Tanaka brought her Raptor down in a textbook landing, her wheels kicking up dust as she taxied toward Kale's aircraft. She popped her canopy and climbed out, her boots hitting the ground with a thud. She approached cautiously, her hand resting on the sidearm she carried but didn't draw. Kale's canopy was still closed. Tanaka could see her through the glass, slumped in her seat, her helmet resting against the side of the cockpit. For a terrifying moment, Tanaka thought she was dead. Then Kale stirred, lifting her head slowly. She reached up and released the canopy, the mechanism hissing as it opened. She didn't climb out immediately. She just sat there, staring at the sky, her expression unreadable. Tanaka waited, giving her space. Finally, Kale spoke, her voice hoarse. You shouldn't have come down. I wasn't going to leave you out here, Tanaka said. Kale looked at her then, really looked at her, and Tanaka saw the exhaustion in her eyes. Not just physical exhaustion, but the kind that came from carrying a burden alone for too long. They told you not to trust me, Kale said. It wasn't a question. They told us a lot of things, Tanaka replied, but I make my own decisions. Kale smiled faintly, a ghost of the pilot she used to be. Good, you'll go far. She climbed out of the cockpit, moving stiffly, and dropped to the ground. Her flight suit was torn in places, stained with hydraulic fluid and blood. Tanaka stepped forward, but Kale waved her off. I'm fine, just bruised. They stood there in the silence of the desert, two pilots separated by rank and circumstance but united by the sky. Tanaka wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but she settled on the one that mattered most. Why are you doing this? Kale's gaze drifted to her damaged aircraft, then back to the horizon. Because someone has to, she said simply. They built this machine to change everything, then buried it because they were afraid. Afraid of the cost, afraid of the risk, afraid of what it meant for the future. The future doesn't wait for people to be ready. It comes whether they like it or not. She paused, her voice dropping. I'm just making sure they don't forget that. Tanaka nodded slowly. She understood, maybe more than Kale realized. Before she could respond, Cortez's voice crackled through her helmet. Raptor 2, we've got inbound, multiple aircraft, ETA 5 minutes. Tanaka's heart sank. Kale heard it too. She glanced at Tanaka, then at the sky. Time to go, she said. Tanaka grabbed her arm. Come with me, let us bring you in, you don't have to keep running. Kale's smile was sad. Yes, I do. She pulled away, climbed back into her cockpit and fired up the engines. The aircraft shuddered, barely holding together, but it lifted off. Tanaka watched her go, a mixture of admiration and sorrow tightening her chest. By the time the recovery team arrived, Kale was gone, her aircraft disappearing into the vast blue. Tanaka climbed back into her Raptor and took off, rejoining Cortez in the air. Neither of them spoke for a long time. When they finally returned to Nellie's, Okonkwo was waiting. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. The look on their faces told her everything. That night in the quiet of her office, Okonkwo pulled up Kale's file one more time. She stared at the photo, at the woman who'd become a ghost, and wondered what it must be like to be that alone. To be that brilliant and that invisible. She closed the file and made a decision. If Kale wanted to make a statement, Okonkwo would make sure it was heard. Not through reports or debriefings, but through the only language that mattered in the military: respect. She picked up the phone and made a call. It was time to change the narrative. Over the next few months, something shifted. The whispers about Kale began to change. Pilots who tried to intercept her spoke not with frustration but with awe. Did you see that climb? The way she rolled out of that dive? She's flying like the machine's part of her. Her call sign, Revenant, became something more than a name. It became a legend. Young pilots training at Nellie's asked about her, their instructors reluctantly sharing stories. How she'd outflown 6 Super Hornets without breaking a sweat. How she'd landed a crippled aircraft in the middle of nowhere and walked away. How she flew like the rules didn't apply because, in her hands, they didn't. Greer tried to suppress the talk, but it was like trying to hold back the tide. Kale had done what she'd set out to do. She'd proven herself. Not to the bureaucrats or the politicians, but to the people who mattered. The pilots who understood what it meant to push a machine to its limits and come out the other side. One evening, Cortez found himself in the simulator, running through a scenario based on one of Kale's recorded flights. He failed 3 times before he even came close to replicating her maneuvers. Tanaka joined him, and together they pushed each other, trying to understand how she did it. It wasn't just skill, they realized. It was instinct, a kind of fearless creativity that couldn't be taught. She's rewriting the playbook, Tanaka said, breathless after another failed attempt. Cortez nodded. And we're just trying to keep up. They weren't alone. Across the country, in bases and academies, pilots were studying Kale's flights, analyzing her techniques, debating her methods. She'd become the benchmark, the standard by which all others were measured, and she wasn't even there to see it. Kale herself had gone silent. The ghost signals stopped. No more appearances over restricted airspace. No more taunts or demonstrations. It was as if she'd simply vanished, her point made, her mission complete. Some believed she'd left the country, taking the aircraft with her. Others thought she'd been captured, quietly detained to avoid embarrassment. But Okonkwo knew better. She'd spent enough time studying Kale to understand that she wasn't done. She was waiting, planning, preparing for something bigger. The question was, what? The answer came 6 months later on a clear autumn morning. A single aircraft appeared over Edwards Air Force Base, flying low and slow as if inviting attention. It circled the field once, twice, then descended, landing smoothly on the main runway. The base went into lockdown. Armed security surrounded the aircraft, their weapons trained on the cockpit. But when the canopy opened, it wasn't Kale who emerged. It was an empty seat, a note taped to the console. Greer arrived within the hour, his face a storm of confusion and anger. He climbed into the cockpit and read the note. It was short, handwritten in neat block letters. "The future is here. Use it wisely. Revenant." The aircraft, it turned out, was the prototype she'd stolen. Intact, fully functional, every system operational, but it had been modified, upgraded, refined in ways the engineers hadn't thought possible. Cale had taken their design and made it better. She'd turned it into something extraordinary, and then she'd given it back. Greer stood on the tarmac, staring at the machine, and for the first time in his career, he didn't know what to say. Okonkwo appeared beside him, her expression unreadable. "She's telling us we were wrong," Okonkwo said quietly. Greer didn't respond. He didn't need to. The aircraft was proof enough. Over the following weeks, engineers descended on Edwards, dissecting Cale's modifications with a mix of awe and disbelief. She'd solved problems they'd spent years struggling with. She'd streamlined systems, improved efficiency, enhanced performance in ways that seemed almost magical. One engineer, a grizzled veteran of the Black Project's world, summed it up best. "She didn't just fly the damn thing, she understood it like it was part of her." The project, long buried, was quietly resurrected. New funding appeared. New priorities emerged. And at the center of it all was a ghost, a woman who'd refused to let her work die. But Cale herself remained a mystery. There were reported sightings, a woman matching her description seen at a small airfield in Montana, another in Alaska, always moving, always alone. But nothing confirmed, nothing certain. Some said she'd retired, content to fade into obscurity now that her point had been made. Others believed she was still out there, flying in the shadows, testing the next generation of machines. Cortez and Tanaka, now both majors with growing reputations of their own, liked to think she was still in the sky. It was a comforting thought, the idea that somewhere above the clouds, Revenant was still flying, still pushing, still proving that the only limits were the ones you accepted. One night after a long training mission, Cortez and Tanaka found themselves sitting on the wing of a Raptor, watching the stars emerge. "Do you think she's happy?" Tanaka asked. Cortez thought about it. "I think she's free," he said, "and maybe that's the same thing." Years passed. The legend of Revenant grew, whispered in ready rooms and taught in classrooms. She became a symbol not just of skill but of defiance, of refusing to be sidelined, of proving that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage you could have. New pilots joined the Air Force, many of them women inspired by the story of a captain who'd flown alone and changed everything. They wore patches with her call sign, honoring a legacy they'd never met but understood deeply. And somewhere in the vast expanse of sky that stretched from coast to coast, a lone aircraft moved through the clouds, its pilot unseen but never forgotten. Because some stories don't end. They become part of the air itself, carried on the wind, passed from one generation to the next. And as long as there are pilots who look up at the sky and see not a ceiling but a challenge, Revenant's legacy will endure. The sky, after all, belongs to those brave enough to claim it. In the halls of the Pentagon, decisions were being made. The program Cale had fought for was no longer a secret. It was the future, embraced by a new generation of leaders who understood that innovation couldn't be controlled, only guided. The aircraft she'd returned became the template for a new class of fighters, machines that blurred the line between human and AI, between instinct and calculation. And at every unveiling, every test flight, every milestone, someone would mention her name. Revenant, the pilot who'd refused to be silenced. Okonkwo, now a colonel, often found herself thinking about Cale. She wondered if the woman knew the impact she'd had, the doors she'd opened. She suspected Cale didn't care. That wasn't why she'd done it. She'd done it because it was right, because the work mattered, because someone had to stand up and say, "This is worth fighting for." And in the end, that was the truest form of heroism. Not the medals or the recognition, but the quiet, stubborn refusal to let the important things die. Okonkwo kept Cale's file in her desk, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary people were the ones who never sought the spotlight. They simply did the work, trusted the mission, and let the results speak for themselves. At Nellie's, a new class of pilots gathered for their first briefing. The instructor, a captain with sharp eyes and an easy smile, stood before them, her hands clasped behind her back. "You're here because you're the best," she began. "But being the best means understanding that you'll always have something to prove. Not to me, not to the Air Force, to yourselves." She paused, letting the words sink in. "There's a story I want to share with you, about a pilot called Revenant." The room fell silent, every cadet leaning forward. They'd heard the name before, whispered in the corridors, passed down like a secret. "She flew alone," the instructor continued. "No wingman, no support, just her and the machine. And she did things that shouldn't have been possible, not because she was reckless, but because she understood something fundamental. The sky doesn't care about your doubts. It only responds to your will." She smiled faintly. "You'll hear a lot of stories about her. Some of them are true, some of them are exaggerated. But here's what matters. She proved that limits are often just a failure of imagination. And when you're up there, alone in the cockpit, that's the lesson you need to remember." Cadets left the briefing inspired, their minds racing with possibilities. They'd come to Nellie's to learn how to fly. They'd leave understanding how to think. And somewhere in the back of their minds, they carried the image of a lone pilot dancing through the sky, untouchable and unbreakable. Kale would never know about the briefing. She'd never know about the patches or the stories or the way her name had become synonymous with excellence. She was too busy flying, pushing the next prototype, chasing the next horizon. But if she had known, she might have smiled. Because in the end, that was the point. Not to be remembered, but to make a difference. To show that one person flying alone could change the course of history. And as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, a lone aircraft streaked across the horizon, its silhouette sharp against the fading light. No one saw it. No one tracked it. But those who understood, the pilots, the dreamers, the ones who refused to be grounded, they felt it. A whisper on the wind, a promise in the sky. Revenant was still flying, and she always would be.